This video is going to be insightful. Joining us today is Steven Lubka. Some would say he's a Bitcoin advocate, better known for being a sun maximalist and walking 350 miles per month every month. It's always insightful, always fun. I should mention Steven. He is the managing director and head of private clients and family offices at Swan Bitcoin. Swan Bitcoin, the Bitcoin-only exchange created by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Steven, it's such a pleasure to have you on. How are you today, mate?
Oh, I'm doing great. Pleasure to be here. Great to meet with you. Great to chat. Looking forward to the conversation.
Such a pleasure for me. Such an honor to have you here. For the people that don't know who you are, can you just touch base on what your role is within Swan, what Swan is, and then how you came into this crypto scene in the last couple of years? I know you got in 2017.
Yeah, so I lead the private wealth team for Swan. That's private client services. We're the leading concierge. So if you're like a wealthy individual, family office, business, corporation, retirement products, if you're looking for a place where it's not just like self-serve, set up your account, figure out two-factor, figure it all out yourself. You're looking for, because a lot of, especially our demographics generally older, right? Like they don't, and if they're doing, a couple $1 million, right? They don't want to just like send that to an exchange and set up an app on their phone, no one to talk to, right? So we have the leading concierge service. So we have private client advisors. They get on the phone with clients. We walk everybody through everything personally. So that's what I do. I run that side of the company for Swan. I've done that for close to the last 3 years. It's grown to over half the business. So it's a really important part of what Swan Bitcoin does. And yeah, so that's what I do there. You're correct. I got in 2017. And, I did, like many people there, friend had told me about it. I looked into Bitcoin. I looked into crypto and ICOs and everything else and did that for a little while. But probably by mid 2018, I started saying, hey, I want to work in this industry. Mid 2018, I realized that Bitcoin was really what I was going to focus on, where I thought the value was. And, I ran a software development agency for a number of years. And then 2019, 2020, I started doing Bitcoin kind of more full time before joining Swan in, basically like January 2020. I also worked as a consultant prior to that for high net worth investors. So I had a background helping high net worth investors navigate Bitcoin, make investments. So I did that for a while prior to Swan.
Interesting. When you're saying you're helping high net worth individuals and moving millions of dollars, I'm sure you can't provide actual figures, but is it like tens of millions, hundreds of millions? Do the prices get that big through Swan at the moment?
Yeah, so let's just say up to 100 million.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting because it's not something that most people are going to see, and to have those conversations. So what are those conversations looking like? Obviously, we're sort of coming out of the bear market at the moment. People within the space are already, we've seen ups, we've seen the down, we understand the traditional media is probably still a little bit bearish. So what are these conversations like that you're having with these high net worth individuals as they're coming in? And are more people coming in, or are you seeing less at the minute?
No, it's been a healthy, I think the real turning point that we saw, obviously volumes taper off in a bear market. That happens for every business in this space. So we saw that as much as anybody else. But the real turning point was Silicon Valley Bank. When Silicon Valley Bank failed, we had our best month in a year. Wow. Really explosive month. Not just high net worth individuals, family offices, corporate treasuries, all sorts of activity. Very large month. It has never cooled off since that point. It's not quite as high, but that was kind of a turning point, and volumes have been elevated since then. So a lot of interest. As far as what those conversations look like, we talk with very sophisticated investors. We talk with, smaller hedge funds. We talk with family offices, obviously individual investors, very successful people, not all in finance, across a variety of industries. But a lot of them really, they get Bitcoin, right? So they're going to have a few questions that maybe they don't fully understand, maybe like what's the regulatory picture, or what's the energy use all about, or something like that. So there's gaps in their knowledge generally, but largely it's not so much, they're not coming in like, boy, this thing sure looks worthless, why should I invest? Right? Like that's not, they get that there's value.
Awesome.
And the conversation starts from a place of like, I'm interested in this asset. I get that it's valuable. I want to own it. Here's a few gaps in my knowledge that I'd like you to help me understand.
Yeah. One of the things you touched on there is the energy argument got brought up. I know that's a big passion topic of yours, which I'd like to dive into. But before that, in August last year, when you were talking on the Simply Bitcoin podcast, you said you're most worried about institutional Bitcoin sort of adoption, stating that was a slippery slope. Obviously, that's happening right now with BlackRock, among many others. Like in the last week, it's been absolutely insane, a whole lot entering the space. Is your thinking still the same there? It's still a slippery slope. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's neither good nor bad.
Yeah. So I have always said, this has been my message to clients for a year and a half. The real attack vector is not a ban of Bitcoin by the government. It is a substitution. It's a sleight of hand. It's Bitcoin goes to $1 million a coin, but everyone only owns paper Bitcoin. Nobody owns actual Bitcoin in cold storage. So what do I mean there? I mean, if I'm the government and I'm worried about Bitcoin, and I'm not even saying that's like really what's going on here. Like, gun to my head in this moment, I think the government doesn't care that much about Bitcoin. I don't think it's like a comprehensive plot. Could be wrong. That's probabilistic. But gun to my head in this moment, it's not high on their radar. But if I was the government and I wanted to like really try to control Bitcoin, I'm not going to ban it. I'm not going to make it illegal. I'm not going to confiscate people's Bitcoin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tap BlackRock on the shoulder. And I said this, I've been saying that from before their filing for years. I'm going to tap Goldman on the shoulder and I'm going to say, hey guys, approve a spot ETF, market the crap out of it. Even if we're feeling really sneaky, we're going to print some money and we're going to give you that money to bid up the ETF. And we're going to accumulate all this Bitcoin in the ETF. And then retail and everyone's just going to own the ETF shares. And suddenly there's 5 million, 10 million BTC out of the 21 million are sitting in a couple ETFs issued by commercial banks and large financial companies in the US. And everyone just uses those as a proxy. And then even it goes further, right? So then even Bank of America integrates it, Wells Fargo integrates it, and you have a Bitcoin wallet right next to your bank account. And so you say, hey, I'm just gonna buy some Bitcoin in my Bank of America account. And you know what, Sean? I'm gonna send you some Bitcoin. I'm gonna pay you. You want $2,000 in Bitcoin? Well, I'll just send it from my Bank of America account to your Wells Fargo account. And the Bitcoin never moves. It's just ledgered between Bank of America and Wells Fargo. And they have effectively substituted a paper product for the genuine article. The price of Bitcoin is $1 million a coin or higher, right? Like everyone's rich. Who cares? Why do you care that you don't own the actual Bitcoin? You're a millionaire. Like they buy off everybody, right? Like that's so much more of what I think would happen. Why? Because it's enormously politically costly to confiscate the assets of American citizens. Like that's an insane maneuver. Nobody understands FDR. Nobody understands Executive Order 6102. FDR was as close to a dictator as the United States of America has ever seen, right? He had almost unilateral executive power. It was a completely different world. Enormously politically costly to confiscate the assets of American citizens. People love Bitcoin. Banning it's very unpopular. Why would you risk that blowback when you could just do a switcheroo? And everyone's happy because they're rich. They like you. They like you.
Do you think if in that scenario, obviously it's only a possibility, not a probability, but say that situation was to play out, would there be two different Bitcoins existing? Like there's the centralized exchange Bitcoin, the ETFs, and then there's the Bitcoin that all of us are holding now that we're not going to sell, we're not going to put through. So like you and I can trade in Bitcoin to Bitcoin. Are these two systems going to exist, or everything's just going to funnel in your situation back into these ETFs?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways it could go is the honest answer. Yes and no could both be pathways. It's not a fork, right? So I'm not describing a fork where there are literally two Bitcoin, like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. Yeah. You're just basically asking about like fungibility between, let's call it like whitelisted Bitcoin and black market Bitcoin. Like, could that happen? It depends. It may not happen because if they amass enough of this stuff, maybe they just don't even care. It's like 18 million BTC are all in the US financial system. Yeah, there's like 500,000 coins circulating that those lunatics have. Like, they don't care. That's a possibility. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying this happens. This is not my prediction. I'm not saying this is what happens. I'm not even saying this is what's going to happen with the BlackRock ETF. I'm just saying it is a slippery slope. Not on the level of price not going up then. So I want to disentangle the concepts of the price of Bitcoin goes up and you make money on your investment from this is good for Bitcoin. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I guess some things I've heard you say a couple of times as well, Stephen, is you're not pessimistic. You just have thought experiments and you think about these things, you talk about these things to be able to contemplate and know what the possibilities or the probabilities are that they can or can't happen if we just turn a blind eye. And I probably noticed that more within crypto over Bitcoin. If something's going wrong and say the developer's doing something a little bit shady, if the marketing's okay, they don't care. But I think people can look at Bitcoin straight up. It's the most looked at code in the world. So I think people just slow down with Bitcoin, which is good. What I want to do is switch gears and talk about this sun. And so you do a lot of sun strolling and a lot of sun trolling. Do you want to tell us?
I'm stealing that. Sun strolling. Trolling.
Yeah. Like I said in the intro, man, your Twitter, it is hilarious. I've put your Twitter below in the description for everyone. Follow Steven. Really funny. What the hell is all this sun strolling, sun trolling about, and the walking as well, if you want to dive into that, mate?
Yeah. So they're similar. They're interrelated. Like I walk because of the sun. I'm in the sun because I walk. They're interrelated, but so I'm well known for people that don't know me. I'm well known on Twitter for two things. I walk like 350 miles a month. I walk like over 10 miles a day, every day. I've done this for years without interruption. And I'm in the sun constantly. I spend almost all my time outside. I work outside. So like, I'm here for the podcast, but for my job, most of the time I'm on the phone, I'm walking around, I'm outside almost constantly. Live in Florida. And so I've, called myself a sun maximalist. Why? So I actually think that we have gotten the record very wrong on sun exposure on a health basis. Walking's obviously less controversial. Of all the Bitcoin trends, I have challenged our critics. Go on, be anti-walking. Try to they criticize the seed oils and other things. I'm like, come at me, bro. You want to be anti-walking? Like, go for it. Like, criticize the health trend. But walking's more straightforward. I'll talk about that. But the sun exposure is more controversial, and it's something that I think we've gotten wrong, very wrong, and to great detriment. So, let's maybe set the record straight before we jump in. I want to be very clear. Burning is bad. If you get a big sunburn, that does increase your risk for skin cancer and other things. Like getting a nasty sunburn is not good. I'm not arguing that. There is a thing as too much. Your tolerance for burning, it's going to vary based on your skin type and where you are and etc. And there's nuance in the exposure. You have to build up a tolerance. You can't just go from working a 9-to-5 job for a decade and you're pasty white, go out in the Melbourne sun at 12 p.m., right? Like, I'm not saying that doesn't work. But that being said, so with those caveats, I believe, and there is research which shows that sun exposure is a health factor, a health risk if you get too little, and a benefit on the same level of smoking, of not eating healthy, of not exercising. It is like a huge fundamental pillar of health. And so when most people hear me say that, they think I'm talking about like vitamin D, or maybe with the popularity of the Huberman Labs podcast, people are like, oh no, there's like a circadian rhythm thing too. So most people, it's pretty conventional nowadays to accept vitamin D and circadian rhythm. Those things matter. I agree. Those things really matter. But the sun is so much more than that. It's been shown to decrease your cancer rates for practically every internal cancer, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, stomach and colon cancer, all these bad cancers, 40 to 60%, huge reductions in cancer across the board, reductions in huge relationships with MS, with neurological symptoms, with diabetes. Even you can look on like John Hopkins, like official establishment medical websites. Diabetes is increasingly being seen to be a circadian illness. What we're discovering is that everything in the body operates on a circadian rhythm. And you have a part of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus that controls all of the clock genes and your global timing states in the body. And light is the thing which entrains your rhythm. And so obviously that's sun during the day. It's also avoiding certain spectrums of artificial light at night. Well, I don't know if we'll get into that, but obviously there's that other thing. But and it's not, you can't substitute it with a bulb, right? Like it's not about just like a bright light or a not bright light. Each spectrum, you got UVA, you got UVB, you got the visible light spectrums. Throughout the day, the balance between red and blue changes. And all of that impacts your circadian signaling, which controls just master balance in your body, your hormones, testosterone, you know, for men and estrogen for both men and women, testosterone and estrogen for both men and women, thyroid functioning, everything. Sun touches everything in the body. And if you're not getting that exposure and you're not in those light cycles, things start to get out of balance. And so that's kind of like, it's done via the eyes. You see the light, it signals, but it's also on the skin, right? It's also on the skin. Really cool thing. So you get your vitamin D. Everyone knows that. UVB strikes the skin. You get vitamin D. Infrared light, which is heat. It's the heat of the sun. It actually penetrates your body up to 6 inches. So like, I mean, it's going to like go through my arm. It's going to hit my internal organs. What happens when it does that? You have light receptors inside your body, inside your brain. There are light sensing cells. There would not be light sensing cells in the brain if light didn't get inside of your brain and your body didn't have some reason to use that signaling. Infrared, though, will penetrate and it will actually, so your mitochondria are like the motors of your body. They produce your energy, they produce ATP. Inside a mitochondria, there's literally a rotary motor. It literally spins. And basically the water and the fluid that motor is in, when the infrared strikes it, it becomes less viscous. So if you imagine a motor spinning in mud versus spinning in clear water, the motor in water can spin faster. And so when sunlight is striking your body, it's upregulating your energy metabolism. So that was a lot of information, but saying that is just to say that it touches everything. And we've been taught to avoid the sun. Obviously, coming back, yes, don't go burn. You got to build up a tan over time. You've got to go at your own pace. But it's as long as you're not going out and getting sunburned, it's a huge health benefit. And I'm outside all day.
Yep. 2 really quick questions on that. Sunscreen, yes or no? And sunglasses, yes or no?
Sunglasses, absolute no from me, unless you're driving or operating a motor vehicle. Like, be sane. Like, I'm not telling you to, like, you're not even getting the benefits if you're behind a windshield anyway, so it doesn't matter. Wear them in your car, I don't care. But if you are outside, walking around or at the beach, absolutely no on sunglasses. You need that light in your eyes.
Yep.
some people will kind of hand wring about like cataracts and different stuff. I think, you can find studies showing everything. You can find studies showing absolutely zero cataract risk. You can find studies showing risk. I like to take an evolutionary argument and just say, like, nobody had fucking sunglasses. Shut the hell up. Like, we didn't have sunglasses. People's eyes weren't falling out. And also, I can send you a pile of papers showing that sunlight is essential to eye health, is essential to eye development, lack of sunlight driving a nearsightedness epidemic. So obviously, if there are some drawbacks, it's a question of dose, not that you need it. You need it. So sunglasses, absolutely no. Everyone should be getting light in their eyes. And that includes normal glasses. That includes contacts. You should strive to have some amount of like actual just direct contact. Sunscreen. So I don't wear sunscreen, and I'm a white guy in South Florida, right? I'm typically very pale if I am not in the sun. Like, I'm a Fitzpatrick type 2 skin. I'm not a dark skin tone. I tan now. But if your choice is between getting a sunburn or not getting a sunburn, like you're going to be out on a boat for 8 hours and you don't have a tan and you're not used to that level of UV exposure, then yeah, like wear some sunscreen, don't burn. But what I tell people to do is just go out until you're going to burn and then go inside or put some clothes on or put a hat on. Like, it's just, you don't need to use sunscreen. Just learn to, you'll feel it. Like, you'll feel it, maybe a little bit of trial and error, but I would say no sunscreen unless you have no other option, but sunscreen's better than burning.
Yeah. And so I guess one thing you could add on top of that, the sun really early in the morning, like through sunrise or coming into sunset, you're not going to get burnt at those times of days. So you can time it. And I'm not recommending this for everyone, but especially when I was doing a lot of Qigong working out in the boats, I'd stand there and have the sun in my eyes for the first 15 minutes, 11 to 15 minutes as it was coming up. And then it would get too bright, but that's something that I had to build up to as well. A lot of ancient cultures did do a lot of sun gazing. So look into it. I'm not advising anyone to do it, but there is a lot of benefits there. Stephen, flipping gears again, everyone talks about Operation Choke Point 2.0. I know you're probably not really fazed by it, but what do you think about the SEC going after Coinbase and Binance in the same week and then BlackRock coming out? Was it a coincidence or what's happening?
So let's tease those apart a little bit, because when I hear Operation Choke Point 2.0, I think banking access in particular. So I wouldn't put Coinbase and like Binance in that bucket, but we'll talk about both of them. So I'm a little bit of a Choke Point 2.0 skeptic, but here's what I mean. So if we define Operation Choke Point 2.0 as there's somebody sitting in the treasury like Janet Yellen sending memos to all of the banks and saying, guys, we've made a federal decision. We're going to secretly debank all of the crypto companies. I do not believe that is happening or that happened. If instead we're saying Operation Choke Point 2.0 is banks naturally reacting to the fallout of FTX, Celsius, BlockFi, are restricting banking access because they're managing risk, then sure, that's happening, right? But I don't believe that it's like this like top-down federal conspiracy. I think it's just kind of natural market-driven blowback by banks that were freaked out by FTX and freaked out by Binance, and that just think there's too much risk in servicing that industry. Now, I run a private wealth team for a Bitcoin company. We have tons of banking partners. We haven't lost a single one of them in, I don't know, what's it been, 6 months since people started talking about this, something like that. So we haven't seen it. None of our contacts in the industry, other Bitcoin companies that we work with and talk to, they haven't seen it. Are crypto companies being restricted? Yeah, it's probably more likely, right? Like if you run, some of these firms that are also getting sued by the SEC, could banks be pulling out? Sure, that makes sense. But there's a lot of banks that serve the industry, and we're served, very fully, by them. So that would be my response on the choke point question.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of it, so it does feel a little to me, I don't have any information here, this is just a gut feeling, but it does kind of feel like SEC comes in, sues Binance, sues Coinbase, like coming into the industry, let's clean it up, let's sue everybody. And then BlackRock and Fidelity and, the big institutional players like roll in and file for the ETFs and do that, right? Like it does feel a little bit like the necessary prerequisite to them doing that was the perception that like the SEC was cleaning up the space and we're going to build trust and we're going to go from there. So does it feel like that to me? Yeah, it does feel like that to me a bit.
Yeah, I think the same thing's happening here in Australia. Banks are limiting like the amount of money you can put across to a crypto exchange each month and stuff. And I just feel the banks and the traditional financial institutions are just going to start selling Bitcoin, Ethereum probably as well, maybe a handful of other cryptos. But I think it'll be severely limited. They'll stick to sort of the blue chips and they'll be like, no, we're protecting you. Don't hop into an exchange. Like it should be our money, our choice. Like, I'm about 90% Bitcoin and then I go out and gamble. But people should be able to do whatever they want and go through a centralized exchange. They're cutting that out. And I think the banks will just be like, sure, you can do it, but you need to come here. I don't know if we're going to have time to jump into CBDCs, but I want to talk about your take on inflation, because I think you approach it very different to sort of everyone else in the space. Do you want to explain how you see inflation, what's going on with all that?
Sure. So I wrote a big piece on this, a big article. So if you're interested in my views in full, go to the website, just type in Steven Lubka, inflation, Swan Bitcoin. Inflation is not consumer price increases. Inflation can cause consumer price increases, but inflation is not consumer price increases. And this isn't just me playing semantics. Historically, in the discipline of economics, this was the definition of inflation. It's only in the modern world with CPI indexes that it's been restructured as how fast bread goes up in price. Why is this distinction important? Well, it's because there are multiple causes of why bread or oil or any good or service may go up. And I'll illustrate this. So imagine a world where the money supply is totally fixed. Let's imagine a Bitcoin standard, right? Nobody can create Bitcoin. No one can issue anymore. There's no money printing. There's no debasement of the money supply. Saudi Arabia, one of the world's biggest oil producers, disappears in a puff of smoke overnight. Nobody knows what happens, right? All that oil gone. Price of oil skyrockets. CPI goes to 15% because oil is a critical input for everything. Everyone's freaking out. The price of everything goes up. Was there any money printed? No. What happened? The supply was disrupted and prices changed. That is not inflation. That is a natural market-driven process by which the costs of goods and services respond to the supply and demand of those goods and services. Inflation, if we're going to talk about it, we should be talking about monetary debasement. We should be talking about the issuance of new money. Because even now, assume the opposite world. Supply and demand are all fixed. They don't change. We produce the exact same amount of everything year over year, and we consume the exact same amount of everything. In that world, prices would always stay the same because nothing changes. There would be no changes in price unless you print money and then you debase the monetary supply and then prices move. So prices can move for two reasons. One is a supply and demand disruption or change. The other is monetary debasement. You're kind of expanding the denominator in which these things are priced. And it's important to know which one's happening. And it's important to know which one we're talking about, especially when people say Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. I agree. Bitcoin is an inflation hedge, but it is not a hedge of CPI broadly unless that CPI was driven by monetary debasement. It is a monetary debasement hedge. So when they print money, you're going to see Bitcoin go up. As they debase money, you're going to see Bitcoin go up. And this is what we saw, right? So a lot of people were like, oh, Bitcoin failed as an inflation hedge because Bitcoin was $60,000 and CPI was 4%. And I bought it when it was $60,000 and the CPI went from 4% to 8% and Bitcoin went down. Like, okay, Bitcoin's not an inflation hedge. Wrong. Bitcoin was $8,000 when they announced the stimulus checks, give or take, and huge monetary increases. CPI at that point was also low. If you bought Bitcoin when they announced that they were expanding the money supply, you're still up over like around 4x, right? You completely outperformed even CPI inflation and monetary inflation. But if you waited until all the money was done being printed and then just based your decision off the lagging indicator of the CPI index, yeah, you didn't hedge your inflation. But that's like saying, I want to buy Apple stock because I think their revenue is going to go up, but I'm going to wait until their revenue goes up and has finished going up to buy it. And now I'm upset that I lost money. Like, that's not how markets work.
Yeah. No, very interesting. So talking about money printing, I believe it was last year, about 8 or 10 months ago, you thought that they'd really start ramping up the money printer again and potentially inject trillions of dollars into the system. Do you think that's still a possibility?
I don't know if that was my exact wording. Do I think that there will be an inevitable expansion? Yeah, of course. The system must do that. There must be expansion. There's too much debt. There's too much leverage. You know, will that happen? I think absolutely. Are we getting close to that happening? Probably. In my most recent interview, this was a few months ago with Kitco, I was asked for I think a peak on the federal funds rate. And the number I gave was somewhere between 6 and 6.5%. I stand by that. It might be less. We might be at the peak now. We might get another 25 basis points, maybe 50 basis points. But we are near the peak on, I think, federal funds rate hikes. And what's going to follow that, maybe there'll just be a pause for a while. But what is inevitably going to follow that sooner or later is there's going to be rate cuts. There's going to be monetary expansion. There's going to be fiscal support. And even like one way my thinking has evolved, I think, since previous conversations is I place a lot more weight actually on the fiscal side of things rather than the monetary side of things. What that means is there's two actors at play here. There's the Federal Reserve, which controls kind of these central monetary policy things. And there's the fiscal authority. So that's the Treasury in the US, or that's the government. That's their spending and their debt. I think the fiscal authority, government spending, debt is actually good. I think they're driving the car right now. They're piloting. I think the Federal Reserve has been removed from the driver's seat. And I think the more relevant factor is less, do they pause, do they cut, is what does government spending look like? And what I anticipate that it'll look like is huge increases to fund decarbonization, to fund social programs, to fund development, to fund other programs, reshoring, reindustrialization. I think we're coming into an age where you're going to see a tremendous level of debt and government spending. And so regardless of any actions that the Federal Reserve takes or what interest rates are at, they will have to drop, I believe. You could still see this monetary expansion, right? The Treasury can expand the monetary supply. In fact, even like more traditionally, like some people will argue about QE not being monetary printing. Those people would accept that the Treasury expands the monetary supply. So they're actually spending money into the economy. So regardless of what the Fed does, although I do believe the Fed will cut rates, we're going to see the Treasury be a larger player. And I think that will drive monetary expansion.
How interesting. I think we've probably got a little bit of time to talk about this. What's going on with CBDCs? It sounds like you're not really worried. They're not going to happen overnight, but there are a couple of things that we should think about in regards to CBDCs.
Yeah, so I'm very against CBDCs. It's a very bad idea. It is a corrosive idea. It is against liberty. It's against freedom. It is a totalitarian idea. But I think people miss the mark on them purely because they don't understand what would be involved in doing it. So to make a CBDC, you not only have to develop the entire system, but you have to reformat all financial infrastructure, credit cards, point of sale, bank, payment softwares, payment processors. You need to disrupt Visa, disrupt American Express. I don't even know how, yes, you could still have credit, right? Like you'll still have credit. It's not that they won't be able to lend money, but payments will not be happening on their payment network. They will be happening on the central ledger. So like a very core aspect of their business is gone. They're not gonna be very happy about that. And there's just an enormous amount of technical work that has to go on. Governments are not good at software. They're not, they're just not. And I don't believe that there is political will to just like do a CBDC today, at least in America. I know I'm an American, so I know that best. In today, it's not just like a clear political will. So there's going to be political debate. And then even if they decide to do it, I would wager it would take them 7 years to do it. It's not fast. It's cumbersome. It's difficult. It's fraught with unresolved questions. And so I'm very against them. But as far as are they a near-term threat, I think absolutely not. And something I'll pose for evidence here. China is a totalitarian regime, right? They have an authoritarian regime. They, if they say we're doing a CBDC, they're doing a CBDC. And years ago, they said we're doing a CBDC. I believe 2017, 2018, something like that. So what? It's been 5 years, maybe 6 years. It still isn't rolled out. Like they have some pilots. They've got a nice little app you can play around with and have fun. But it's unserious. It's not like the Chinese consumer makes all the purchases using the digital yuan. Very few purchases are made using the digital yuan. It's like nothing. So a government that can like fully dictate its will and has been working on this for 5 or 6 years hasn't delivered. So why do we think this very convoluted American political system is suddenly going to pull this off in a year? Like they're not.
I think that's awesome. Hopefully everyone watching this takes a lot of comfort from that. We obviously talk about CBDCs a lot here on this channel. They come up all the time in the news. I think my take on it is they'll just keep building, and then it'll just feel like it happened overnight, whatever time frame that is, whether it's 5, 10, 7 years, whatever it is. But we are going to keep hearing about it, and I think, like you think,
and we need to, and we should be talking about it. To be clear, I'm not saying this means like we kick our feet up and relax and just, it's a horrible threat and people should be resisting it along the way. I'm just optimistic. If we resist, if we make it a pain in the ass to implement, it's already such a pain in the ass to implement that this thing can get seriously slowed down.
Yeah, I think there's powers in numbers. So everyone watching it, everyone in the crypto community, as more and more people get educated, I think we have the opportunity to be able to take control back and just to be able to say, no, I think DeSantis is doing a good thing, putting those things in. But most people, unless they're in crypto, aren't really aware that CBDCs are bad. It just sounds like a digital dollar or crypto 2.0, how they sell it. So 2 scenarios. How do you orange pill someone? Number one, somebody who's a bit older, maybe coming towards retirement, potentially in retirement, compared to someone like myself. I'm young, a lot of time to accumulate more capital, take more risk. Probably 2 very different conversations. What's that pill in a jar look like?
Yeah, so it looks like we have an amazing portfolio tool called Nakamoto Portfolio. What we've done is our CIO, he's run a bunch of analysis. Bottom line, this surprised even me. The average portfolio will not only see higher returns, but will see a better risk profile with a 5% Bitcoin allocation. So you can show people numbers that say, hey, owning Bitcoin over the last 5 years, you not only made more money, but you actually lowered your risk, your volatility, your drawdowns. You actually improved. And so there's not this like, it's not like, oh, it's this high flying asset. And like, yeah, I'm gambling. I might make more money, but I might also get wrecked. Like, obviously, there's risk with every investment, but it actually improved risk and volatility. So I think it's walking through some of those discussions for retirees, for people that are trying to live off their portfolio. It's having a conversation about sizing it appropriately. If I'm talking to a 70-year-old who is living off their investments, you don't do a 50% Bitcoin allocation, right? Like that's not right. Like you have to size that appropriately based on how they'll be drawing that down and what sort of maximum volatility they can handle. It's also just, a lot of times they're going to want a custodial solution too. That's the bottom line. We preach self-custody. We're very pro self-custody. We think self-custody is the last line of defense against things like spot ETFs. But not everyone's going to do it. That's okay. Like we don't need them to. We need good custody. Alan Farrington recently wrote an article that said the opposite of good custody is not self-custody. It's no custody. It's you just buy paper Bitcoin, right? If you don't give retirees and wealthier, older investors the ability to own Bitcoin, at least an option in a custodial solution while they figure out self-custody, massively limiting the who's going to be investing in it. They need that option. And, I think, everyone's got some stories. I saw one in the comments of like, hey, my retired dad, he does self-custody 100%. That's great. I know a ton of people that do it too. I'm not saying in any way it doesn't happen, or even that not a material percentage of people do it. But I wonder, you're watching this, you probably taught him. You probably taught him to do that. What about the people that don't have anybody to teach them? What about the people that don't have a grandson or a son or a daughter or a granddaughter that's going to walk them through the setup and make them feel comfortable? Well, part of the reason that's where we come in. That's why we do a concierge service. Shameless self-promotion. But there's a wide net, right? And you're going to get more people if that's an option. And what I always tell my clients that like don't feel comfortable going into self-custody immediately is like, that's fine. You can still make the purchase. We have a custodial option. We'll educate you while you're doing it. So you got your Bitcoin. We'll do some education over the next month or two. Order a Trezor, order a Jade, set it up. We'll walk you through it. Practice backing it up from the seed. And after 2 months or 3 months, when you feel comfortable with your $1 million buy, to put it into something you control, or maybe even only part of it, right? Like something I'm like shocked is like, nobody, like there's some like unwritten rule that you have to pick one method and put 100. And who made this up, right? Like you could say, hey, I'm going to put half my coins in my hardware wallet and half my coins here. And maybe for a retiree that doesn't have earning years left, if there's a mistake, like there's no more money being made and they're already a little nervous, maybe that split is the best option for them. It's a highly personal decision. But when you're dealing with, and we don't make money off custody. So like I have no financial incentive to be saying any of this, except that for this demographic, I think it is sometimes appropriate. And I think that we should have custody solutions that are 10 times better than anything is right now. I think we need to make that like way, way better. And that's going to help get adoption. You need to improve self-custody user experience 10x, and you need to improve the custodial experience. Everything needs to improve. And that's how you're going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's what you guys are doing, because I've signed up with Swan Bitcoin now. Shameless plug, nothing, I'm not getting anything for this interview, but I've put all your links in the description, your website, Swan's Twitter, your Twitter, so everyone jump on there. Couple of the things when I was looking over the app is just literally in the last couple of days, I jumped onto Swan Bitcoin, but it looked like there's like you can dollar cost average, you can do day, week, month. It looks like that keeps coming out. But also, was there an automatic withdrawal of Bitcoin and into whatever wallet address you put in there as well?
Yeah, we make it so easy. So you can set up an automated withdrawal on our website. So every time your account crosses 0.1 BTC, it just gets sent to your hardware wallet. Like, everyone should take self-custody that can do it. Like we hit this messaging super hard. We made withdrawals. Yeah. They're not only automated, they're free. We pay the network fees. So like, we want you to take self-custody. It's just important to recognize that on the larger arc of Bitcoin development and Bitcoin adoption, having other pathways that aren't that will be important.
Yeah, 100%. Really fun question. WTF for pocket stakes? What's that all about?
Yeah, so shout out to Ben Justman. So this is a meme that originated on Bitcoin Twitter. My buddy Ben, he's a big skier, so he loves to ski. And when he was up on the mountain, he realized like he didn't have any good snacks that met like his diet and what he was trying to do. So he started just cooking a steak and putting it in his pocket, right? Not just like raw, but he put it in his pocket. Nice warm steak in his pocket while he's skiing, and then he eats the steak with his hand. He would eat it on the mountain, and so this became pocket steak, and it started trending and started going, and it's got a nice following.
Do you not have jerky over in the States, like dry meat?
We do, but they have like steak.
Yeah, why not?
I increasingly feel. Let me give you a rare take. Something I'm thinking about lately. And like, I'm kind of a guy that has popularized, a couple health trends on Bitcoin Twitter, but it's like led me to think like Bitcoin's a cultural movement. Like in many ways, Bitcoin is not just a technology. It's not just a monetary asset, but it's become a cultural movement. And what I mean specifically, I think it's less defined by the content. So I'm less concerned with defining what is that cultural movement, what do Bitcoiners stand for? Because that answer is going to vary. It's not like consensus. It's not that like Bitcoiners all agree. In fact, Bitcoiners disagree a lot. But,
no shit.
Heavily, there's people that disagree with everything I fucking say. And they're Bitcoiners too, and they might have their own kind of trends and cultural trends that they subscribe to. But what Bitcoin is, and what the Bitcoin community is people who are engaged consciously in the process of questioning our cultural assumptions. And in that way, it is a cultural movement because it's a group of people that are willing to rewrite the norms on our physical culture. Do we take calls walking or sitting at a desk? Our diet, like what foods do we think, sun exposure of other, trends? And that'll probably evolve further. And maybe those answers and the topics that are popular are completely different in 5 years. I'm not making this about the content, but one thing I've come to really love about the Bitcoin community is it's a group of people that are like fearlessly unafraid to do that investigation, and that when the community feels that they have stumbled onto something which is culturally valid, which improves on the modern condition, they champion it like relentlessly. And that's awesome. We need that because I think our cultural technology, like if you think of culture as technology, it was just so irrevocably disrupted by modernity. You have these long-standing societies that did things a certain way. They ate certain food. They navigated the world a certain way. They had certain physical artifacts, a way of life that developed over thousands of years. And modernity comes along, and factory work comes along, and technology comes along politics comes along, globalization comes along, and it's irrevocably disrupted. It's changed forever. And we've never recovered from that, right? And I'm not making it about what I think the answers are. I'm making it about the questions that we should be asking these questions. And if you just blindly assume that the way we do things today is correct, well, I think that's the wrong assumption. And I'll close with, one other comment is like, sometimes people will critique me because I'm like pro-sun, and they'll say like, there's this body of evidence, you're critiquing like all these studies. And like, you get into a black hole because this study says this and this study says the complete opposite. And then you're debating the studies, and it never goes anywhere because like the entire epistemology has certain like gaping holes. But I'll get, somebody's critique like, oh, you're going against this like volume of literature. And so, okay, so when you say I'm going against this literature, well, what do you mean? We're talking about health. So you're saying that the literature is describing how to do health, right? Like that's what it would mean. If the literature is correct and I'm going against it, I'm going against the literature's prescription for health. And so you're saying the literature describes how to do health. Okay, so, and people are following these recommendations. So the next question is, are people healthy? Are we healthy? Are the people following these recommendations healthy? No. Like disease rates are skyrocketing, like everything's topsy-turvy, like all of these diseases are up, and it's not fucking sampling bias. It's not that people are getting evaluated more. They're literally increasing. Melanoma is skyrocketing. Autoimmune diseases are all over the place. So obviously something is wrong. If you're saying that common knowledge about health is correct, then we should be healthy. And I don't think it's fair to say that we are. Therefore, like, it's a flawed assumption to say that you're going against the research in a certain way. You can obviously do that in an insane way that's backed up by nothing. But if there is a competing set of research which shows the opposite trend, like, here we are, right? So, the reason I think like, and that plays into the point about kind of the cultural movement of Bitcoin, we need to question these things because we do not have it figured out right now as a mainstream normative culture. Our knowledge infrastructure is flawed. Our method of approaching truth, our method of approaching knowledge has failed us to either a small or a large degree. And the only way we're going to cross this like epistemological chasm is by questioning the artifacts of knowledge itself, of how we do knowledge and how we've been led astray.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good message to be able to wrap it up. Always question, always test. Steven, I cannot wait to have you back. This is an absolute pleasure. I know you've got a meeting 3 minutes ago. Hey, stay backstage. Everyone have a very beautiful day. Be blessed. Peace.